"Son, buy some apples. Homegrown, natural, no chemicals." It was the phrase, "no chemicals," that made Alex stop and turn around. His grandmother used to say this back when he was just a boy. "Did you say no chemicals?" he asked, approaching the stall. The elderly woman with a small pile of apples brightened up and quickly started chattering. No chemicals, straight from my tree in the garden. This year, the apple tree produced more than ever. Don't be fooled by how small they are, unlike the ones from the resellers. Those are shipped in from who knows where. More poison than apple in those. But these are local. She quickly sifted through the apples with her hands, showing him the fruit from every angle. They smell like real apples, and they're delicious. Just try one, see for yourself. Look. She continued enthusiastically, holding out an apple with a small brown mark. See? Even a little worm's had a bite, because it's natural, no chemicals. Alex couldn't help but laugh. So they're all wormy? Oh no, the woman hastily withdrew the apple. Look, the rest are perfect. This one just slipped by, but if a worm eats it, that means it's harmless for people, right? Like I said, no chemicals. Alex didn't really need apples. He had simply taken a shortcut through the evening market on his way home. But something in the woman's appearance, her way of speaking, her honest, straightforward gaze, and even her mention of the worm as proof of her words reminded him of his own grandmother. A long-forgotten warmth spread through his chest, and Alex suddenly wanted to do something kind for this old woman selling her apples. Without bargaining, he bought 2 kilograms, not even sure why, and told her that his little boy was feeling under the weather, he was often sick, that his wife was expecting, and that maybe these natural apples would be good for them. Without quite knowing why, Alex found himself sharing with this stranger the worries that weighed on his heart. The woman sighed, shook her head, and murmured about how nowadays the older generation was healthier than the young. Because, after all, what food do you have in the cities? It's all chemicals. Even the air here is heavy and sickly. Alex nodded, agreeing. When he was about to leave, she suddenly grabbed his hand. Listen, come back tomorrow. I'll bring you some dried linden and a jar of mashed raspberries with sugar. Best remedy for colds. I'll bring it, so make sure you come tomorrow. Alex walked home with the apples, smiling to himself. He felt warm inside, like he used to as a child, when his grandmother would stroke his head with her rough, calloused hand and say, "It's okay, Alex. Everything's going to be all right." He never knew his parents. His grandmother had always said that she didn't know his father either, and as for his mother, well, she wasn't the reliable type. One day, she had brought him home from the city, wrapped in a blanket, and then disappeared, promising to come back when she'd sorted out her life. But she never did. Alex loved his grandmother. When she would sigh heavily on winter evenings, remembering her lost daughter, she would pull him close, kiss his head, and he would say, "Don't cry, Grandma. When I grow up, I'll never leave you. I'll always live with you. Do you believe me?" "I believe you, Alex. I believe you," his grandmother would smile through her tears. But when Alex turned 12, his grandmother passed away. That's how he ended up in a boarding school. Relatives he hadn't even known about sold his grandmother's house. He had always thought it was just the two of them against the world, but when it came to inheritance, plenty of people appeared. Anyone who has lived in an orphanage knows all the charms of such places, and those who haven't will never fully understand. But Alex didn't break down and didn't take the wrong path. He served in the army, learned a trade. The only thing that didn't seem to go well was his luck with women. Despite being tall, athletic, and handsome, all of his girlfriends would vanish as soon as they learned he was an orphan. That's why, 5 years ago, when he bumped into Emma at the supermarket, they had grown up in the same orphanage, he was as happy as if he had met a close family member. Emma was just as happy to see him. 6 months later, they were married, had a son, and now they were expecting a daughter. Life was finally settling down. "Emma, I bought some apples for you and Oliver at the market, homegrown, no chemicals," he said, handing her the bag. Emma, who had grown up in an orphanage, paid little attention to the description. She washed the apples, placed them in a large bowl, and set them on the table. Half an hour later, the room was filled with the smell of fresh apples. "These are amazing apples. They smell so good," Emma said, munching on them with their son. "That's because they're homegrown, No chemicals, Alex replied with a smile. That night, Alex dreamed of his grandmother. She was stroking his head, smiling and saying something. He couldn't quite make out the words, but it didn't matter. He knew she was saying something kind, something gentle, and it filled him with peace and happiness, the forgotten happiness of childhood. The sound of the alarm mercilessly cut through the dream. Alex felt off the entire day at work. Something was bothering him. A vague sense of sadness gnawed at his soul, and a lump would occasionally rise in his throat. On his way home, he realized he really wanted to see that old woman with the apples at the market again. Mabel Clark, the elderly woman who sold apples, wandered aimlessly around her yard, sighing heavily as she wiped away the tears that kept welling up in her eyes. Her eldest son had died long ago while on duty. He was a firefighter, never having had the chance to marry. Her younger daughter, a beautiful and intelligent girl, had married an African man while studying at university in the capital and had moved away to a tropical climate where bananas and pineapples grow. Her late husband had raged about it, spitting with anger. But what could she do? All she could do was cry, sensing deep down that she would never see her daughter again. And so it was. As long as her husband had been alive, Mabel Clark had held on. But when he passed away 2 years ago, the light went out of her soul. She lived more out of habit now, praying that God would take her sooner to the land of peace. That young man who bought apples yesterday had stirred up old memories in her. A stranger, yet he spoke to her so kindly, not brushing her off. There was something in his eyes, some hidden sadness, pain. She had felt it immediately. Her maternal instincts had broken through in her words. "Come back tomorrow. I'll bring you some dried linden flowers and a jar of mashed raspberries with sugar. Best remedy for colds. I'll bring it, so make sure you come tomorrow." Now, as she wrapped the jar of raspberry preserves in newspaper, Mabel couldn't help but smile, thinking about what else she could bring for that young man and his family. She really wanted to make someone happy, and, of course, to talk a bit more like they had yesterday. The stall where she had been yesterday was taken, so Mabel set up nearby in the next row. She laid out her apples in a small pile, her eyes scanning the crowd, hoping not to miss him. People were streaming home from work. By this time, Mabel was starting to get nervous. Silly old woman, making up stories for yourself, imagining things. Why would he want to listen to or trust some stranger? She thought irritably, but her eyes kept searching the crowd for a familiar silhouette. Alex hadn't paid much attention to the mention of linden tea and raspberry jam the day before. These market ladies will say anything to sell their goods, he thought. But what if she does show up? She didn't seem like a savvy saleswoman. She even showed me that worm. What a character, he smiled, remembering the passion with which she had spoken about the worm. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll be passing by the market anyway. Might as well check. Alex walked to the part of the market where the old lady had been the previous day, but there was no sign of her. Great. I got played like a fool, he thought, feeling irritated. Good thing I didn't brag to Emma about the promised raspberry jam yesterday. His mood soured, and without looking around, he quickened his pace. "Sonny, over here! Over here! Wait!" came a loud voice, and Alex saw the old woman hurrying toward him. She grabbed his arm excitedly and pulled him along, talking nonstop. "The spot was taken, so I set up over here. I was worried I'd miss you, wasn't sure if you'd come. I brought everything, but I thought maybe you didn't believe me about the jam." She kept chattering, but Alex wasn't really listening. For a moment, his mind drifted back to his childhood. Her way of speaking, the words she used, her hand gestures, the look in her eyes as she tried to please someone with her actions, it all reminded him so much of his own grandmother. He asked how much he owed, but Mabel waved him off, saying she had made the jam for herself and that it was a gift. She added that her raspberries weren't store-bought, just the old kind, not as big or pretty, but fragrant and full of flavor. Alex remembered his grandmother's raspberries, their smell and taste. And for some reason, he suddenly thought about potatoes, the yellow-fleshed kind, so appetizing on a plate, and how delicious they were. After his grandmother's death, he had never eaten potatoes like that again. "Do you have any yellow potatoes?" he interrupted her. "I do. Yellow ones, white ones, the kind that boils down well, and firmer ones for soup. I like the yellow ones. My grandmother used to make them for me when I was a kid." Alex said wistfully. Sonny, tomorrow's Saturday, your day off. Why don't you come to my village and pick out the potatoes yourself? I've got plenty more besides. I'm too old now, it's hard for me to carry heavy bags, but you're young, and it's not far, just a 40-minute train ride. Come on, I'll treat you right. And so, Alex went. Not for the potatoes, but for the warmth he had lost from his childhood. 2 years had passed. Are you sure these cookies are fresh? Mabel asked for the second time. Yes, I told you. They came in yesterday. Honestly, you're like a child, replied the shop assistant. My kids are coming to visit tomorrow with the grandkids. That's why I'm asking. Let me have one to taste. Look at that. Old Mabel's completely lost her marbles, whispered some women in the queue. She's found some strangers and lets them stay in her house. Last summer, Emma and her kids stayed there all season. Must have liked it. They're coming back again? Tell me about it. Strangers like that will take everything she has, maybe even hit her over the head. It's a nice house. Her late husband was a good provider. I've told her plenty of times, but she just brushes it off. Give me a kilo of those good cookies, Mabel said, ignoring the gossip. Finally, the women behind her sighed. You're feeding the wrong people, Mabel. Mabel Clark walked home slowly, smiling to herself. What did she care about their gossip? It was just idle talk. Family or not. What difference did it make? Where were her own family all these years? They never even remembered her. But Alex and Emma, they helped her. And it wasn't about the help, really. Alex, why wait until tomorrow? I've already packed everything, and we've got time to catch the last train. Let's go. Emma urged her husband as he came home from work. Dad, let's go to Grandma's, little Oliver chimed in. She's got chickens, pies, and cherry dumplings. It's so fun there. Baba! 2-year-old Lily jumped up and down. I want to see Baba. Alex looked at his family, smiled, and waved his hand. Let's go. They sat on the train, the children watching the scenery pass by, occasionally shouting in excitement. Look, look. Alex and Emma just smiled, not thinking about much. After all, isn't it wonderful to have a grandma who is always waiting for you? A few years had passed, and Mabel Clark's countryside home had become a true haven for Alex, Emma, and their children. Oliver and little Lily loved visiting the countryside, where they could run through the meadows, play with chickens, pick berries, and enjoy the delicious pies Mabel baked. They frolicked on the green grass, rolling down hills, their laughter filling the air, and free from the rush of the city. For Alex and Emma, these trips were a breath of fresh air. Every visit filled them with warmth and peace, something they often missed in the busy city life. And for Mabel, these visits became the very reason she found joy in living again. Each time the family arrived, she would carefully prepare treats, clean her home, and cherish the connection she had found with them. Her house, once quiet and lonely, now echoed with the sound of children's laughter and the kind of joy she thought was long gone. This friendship brought each of them something they needed. Mabel found a new family to care for, loving them as if they were her own children and grandchildren. Alex rediscovered a connection to his childhood, where the care and simplicity of country life reminded him of his own grandmother. Emma found a wise and kind friend in Mabel, someone she could share her thoughts with. And the children grew up surrounded by love, playing in the open air, learning values not through words, but through the warmth of their shared experiences. The moral of this story is simple. Sometimes in the most unexpected moments, we find the people who fill the empty spaces in our hearts. And often, what we've been searching for all along comes in the form of simple, caring, and open-hearted connections. Mabel, Alex, Emma, and their children found each other, and together, they created something more than just friendship. They built a family. That's how the story ends, friends. Join the conversation below and share your thoughts on this story. If you found it captivating, share the link with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story that will make your heart race. Your support inspires us to create more tales. Take care and see you next time.